107.1 KGSR Radio, Austin, Texas. And one of the things about Austin is that we're a magnet for some of the greatest musicians that have ever made rock and roll music. And two of the latest are with us today, Bobby Whitlock and his partner Coco Carmel. Their album has come out today called Lovers. And as I said earlier, Bobby, we could talk forever about the things you've been through. There are books written about the things you've been through, but today we're just kind of skimming the surface. But I was curious how a guy who grew up in Memphis at Stax Studios, watching the great R&B records from Stax being made, wound up in England playing with Delaney and Bonnie, but Derek and the Dominoes and George Harrison for All Things Must Pass.
Well, Delaney and Bonnie came to that when they did what was to be their second record, but it was initially to be their first. See, Duck and Steve and them used to come and used to hear me play, because I played all the Stax stuff.
And you're talking about Duck Dunn and Steve Cropper from Stax.
Yeah. They would come, because I was playing everything on their catalog, you know, and then I was doing Expressway to Your Heart and Good Lovin', you know. And they brought Bonnie and Delaney to hear me play one time. And they hadn't even put the band together or anything. It was just an idea. And they asked me, would I like to go to California? I said, well, hell yeah. And that was like a Thursday. I was out there with my Nehru suit and my little fat butt on Saturday, you know, and it was in Hawthorne, living with Delaney and Bonnie. It's just the three of us, and we played acoustic guitar, kind of like Coco and me, when we came here. And we played acoustic guitar, and then we formed the band Friends, Delaney and Bonnie and Friends. Eric, we opened up for Blind Faith. Eric wanted to play with us. He did. When that whole thing was over, everybody else went to Mad Dogs and Englishmen. I hung with D&B and Friends, and we did a couple more records. That got too crazy. Cropper paid for my ticket and told me to call up Eric Clapton, and he said, I'll buy you a ticket if Eric, you guys ought to get it together. And so I called up Eric and said, what you doing? He said, I'm getting my hair cut. And I said, how about if I come over? He said, how about if you do? Called up Cropper the next morning. There was a ticket waiting on me for England. One way, I had about $150 in my pocket. I just packed up my little do-wah-diddy and off I went. Showed up at Eric's house, and he didn't really think I was coming. And he was sitting there and he said, what you doing here? I said, well, I told you I was coming. And the rest, as they say, is like that rock and roll thing. He and I hung out there at Hurtwood, his place, and wrote songs. And next thing you know, the phone rings. George says, hey man, why don't you guys, after those guys get finished with the Mad Dogs thing, why don't you guys play on my record? And he said, yeah, if we can record a few things as well. And so we did. That's when we did the first version of, we did Roll It Over and Tell the Truth. And that's when we really put the Dominoes together, right during that session.
So Derek and the Dominoes formed during George Harrison's All Things Must Pass session.
Yeah, and that's really when it came together. And it was supposed to have been Jim Keltner. And this is the shortest version of this I have ever said.
Because there's a book written
and I was born in 1948, all right?
And it's 2008. There's actually a book written by Jan Reed about the Layla sessions.
Pretty wild book.
Everything is in there that you could want to know, or maybe too much information as far as you're concerned.
Ferrari crashes, everything. Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's all out there on the table. It's a lot of fun.
Bobby Whitlock and Coco Carmel will play the Saxon March 8th with the amazing band that's on this new record of theirs that's out today, Lovers. And we're going to conclude with a song called Layla. And Bobby Whitlock co-wrote about half of the Layla album. I Looked Away, Keep On Growing, wrote by himself Thorn Tree in the Garden.
Tell the Truth.
Why Does Love Got to Be So Sad?
Any Day, my favorite.
And yet you didn't write Layla, and you chose to record that.
It was one of those things that just happens. You know, seeds are planted, and some trees bloom in spring, and some of them bloom in winter. Some of them, like cicadas, don't come around until every 13 years, you know. And so Coco and I was in Nashville, and we were talking about this Layla thing, and people always asked me why didn't I do it, and I said, well, that's Eric's song. And at best I would play the piano ending, which I really didn't like in the first place, but I would do that just to appease their appetites. And never did Layla, and we got talking about it once, and I said, well, really it's all about Albert anyway, and those vocal licks off of a song that he did as the years go passing by. That's the lick. That's as the years go passing by. And we was talking about that, and I said, not a whole lot of people know it. And Dwayne brought that to the session. Those licks, we sped it up. Da-da-da-da-da-da, became the most famous 7 licks that there is. And I said, but how would we do this thing if we did do it? And I said, what do you do when you get lonely? And then I went, oh man, that's it. I had one of those light bulb moments. And it was just like that. She was in the other room and she came in, that's it. I went, yeah. And it goes from that, well, you'll hear it. And so we just let those guys play, and the solo that I really would have always wanted to do on this song, I got to do on this record, and it's just one great big note.
Before we hear it, because you gave me such a great setup there, but I want everyone when they're listening to it to hear this version of Layla. Who are the guitarists?
It's David Grissom, Eric Johnson, and Stephen Bruton. Coco's on bass.
All live.
And yeah, all the guitar work on this record is live. Those guys walked in. When we did The Road to Austin, actually Layla was the first thing that we did on the session, because they were going to come and do like a couple of numbers, and we was going to have Layla Day. Dave Mason was originally going to be a part of it, but and this thing happened like it was, nobody had control of the situation. It was controlling itself. At one point in time, Eric couldn't show, and David could, and then the next thing you know, David can't, and Eric can, and the next thing you know, nobody can, and then the next thing you know, everybody can. And so I said, well, let's do Layla Day first day. And that's what happened, and it was awesome, because we had already done it on the Road to Austin. We had done this version on the Road to Austin, and it came off like gangbusters.
And we did every song.
And so what we did, they did every song. It was amazing. And then they just sat down, we set it up just like they were playing live. The 3 of them, with Stephen in the middle, and David to the left, and Eric to the right, and they just put it on 12 and let it crank.
Well, that's what we're going to do. Happy Valentine's Day, y'all.
Yeah,
To you too,
thank
and
you so
everyone else,
much.
thank you.
Bobby Whitlock and Coco Carmel are guests today. The new album is Lovers. It's out today. They'll be at the Saxon March 8th, and they'll be around for South by Southwest with Eric Johnson, Stephen Bruton, and David Grissom. Here's Bobby and Coco on KGSR.